So, the big question. Will the UK send RCH-155 artillery to Ukraine? It is Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. And the answer to that question, well, it involves a massive £52 million deal, a revolutionary robot cannon that sort of creates its own rhythm of combat, and a very distinct line in the sand about who gets the best weapons first. Is it the British Army or is it the front lines of the Donbass? But look, before we get into all the heavy metal and the, industrial politics, if you want to understand who is winning the technology war in Europe and why it matters, you really need to be in the loop. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. I'm Alex Oz. Join me with Arya in the latest Deep Dive by Defense Report for a sharp, no-nonsense breakdowns of the latest in global defense news, military technology, and strategic developments. And today we're going to cover a story that is, frankly, a bit mind-bending. We are talking about the RCH-155. It's being hailed as the future of artillery, a literal spaceship on wheels. But the big story today isn't just the machine itself, it's the politics of production. We have a confirmed deal signed between London and Berlin, but there's a huge twist in the timeline. It's a story about advanced tech, the Trinity House Agreement, and a critical question of whether the British Army is accepting a dangerous gap in its own defenses to make sure Ukraine wins.
It's a fascinating tangle of industry and strategy. It really is. We are looking at a massive new defense pact, but at the same time, we're looking at a pretty stark reality for the British Army. I mean, they have virtually no heavy guns left. They gave them all to the fight in the East. And now they are basically waiting in line for a system that might not arrive in force until, the end of the decade. But as we'll see, there's a very good, albeit very risky, reason for that delay.
Okay, so let's unpack this. We keep hearing about the RCH-155. The press releases call it a game changer, which is a term I usually hate because it's so overused. But looking at the specs you've pulled, this thing actually seems to warrant the title. What makes it so special compared to the old AS-90s the UK used to run, or even the Archers they just bought?
To understand the RCH-155, you have to sort of forget what you know about traditional artillery architecture. Usually you have a tracked vehicle, a big crew of 5, maybe 6 guys sweating inside, hauling shells. They stop, they plant these massive spades in the ground just to stabilize the recoil. Then they fire, and then they have to pack everything up again. Yep. It's just a slow process. The RCH-155, that's remote-controlled howitzer, is entirely different.
It's the modularity that sets it apart, isn't it? This whole thing is built on the Boxer platform.
Exactly. The Boxer is like the Lego brick of the modern British Army. It's an 8x8 wheeled chassis. You can pop the back off and swap a troop carrier module for, say, an ambulance module. In this case, KNDS, the manufacturer, has slapped a massive, fully automated turret on top. It's called the AGM, or Artillery Gun Module. And it uses the L-52 gun from the famous Panzerhaubitze 2000, which we all know is basically the sniper rifle of cannons.
Okay, but sticking a big gun on a truck isn't totally new. We've seen Caesar, we've seen Archer. The big claim here is that it can fire while moving. Now, can you just clarify the physics of that for me? Are we talking about a tank taking a direct shot, or is this indirect artillery fire while it's rolling down a highway?
It is indirect fire while moving, which is, mathematically, it's incredibly difficult. The RCH-155 can be rolling at, say, 30 kilometers per hour. It receives a target coordinate, and its computer calculates everything. The vehicle's movement, the wind, propellant temperature, the target's location. It stabilizes the barrel against the motion of the chassis, and it fires. It doesn't need to stop. It doesn't need spades.
That completely changes the survivability equation. In Ukraine, we've seen that counter-battery radar is absolutely lethal. If you shoot, the enemy knows where you are in seconds.
Precisely. That flash-to-bang time for return fire can be under 2 minutes. So if you have to spend 90 seconds packing up your spades and retracting the barrel,
sitting duck.
You are a sitting duck. The RCH-155 creates a totally new rhythm. It can drive, fire maybe 8 rounds in a minute, and be a kilometer away before the first shell even lands on target. It's not just mobile, it's elusive.
It's ghost artillery, effectively. And you mentioned in the notes the automation goes even further than that. The crew isn't even in the turret.
No, not at all. The crew is reduced to just 2 people, a commander and a driver. They sit safely in the armored hull, completely separate from the gun and all the ammunition. The robot upstairs does all the work, the loading, the fusing, the firing.
Going from a crew of 5 or 6 down to 2 is just a massive shift in logistics. But here's where it gets really interesting for me, this hunter-killer mode. That sounds like something from a main battle tank, not a long-range howitzer.
Usually is a tank feature, yeah. It means the commander can spot a target independently of the gunner. But on the RCH-155, because of its advanced optronics and stabilization, can actually engage targets with direct fire, so looking straight at them, up to 1.8 kilometers away.
So if a Russian T-90 suddenly pops up over a nearby ridge, this artillery piece doesn't have to call for help.
Exactly. It can just lower the barrel and
Yeah.
engage directly. It effectively becomes a very large, very angry tank destroyer for its own self-defense. Gives the crew a fighting chance in a fluid battlefield where the front line might collapse and, enemies suddenly appear from the flank.
And when it's doing its main job long range, what kind of reach are I actually talking about?
Well, your standard shells will hit 40 kilometers. Base bleed shells push that out to about 54 kilometers. And if you use the volcano guided ammunition, you are reaching out and destroying targets 70 kilometers away with pinpoint precision.
That is deep strike capability. Okay, so the machine is an absolute beast. No one's disputing that. But the best gun in the world is useless if you don't actually have it. Which brings us to the news that dropped just recently in December 2025. The UK and Germany signed this huge joint procurement contract worth 52 million pounds.
That's right. And this is where we have to, read the fine print, because the headline numbers can be a little deceiving.
52 million pounds sounds like a whole fleet procurement to the average listener.
Yeah.
But it's not, is it?
No, not even close. That 52 million covers development, non-recurring engineering costs, testing, integration, all that stuff. And in terms of actual hardware, the UK is buying one early capability demonstrator, or ECD, just one.
One gun. We sold the public on a massive modernization program, and we bought one gun.
For now, it's a trial. The British Army needs to test it on their ranges, integrated with their comm systems. Germany is getting two demonstrators, but they have a framework agreement for up to 500 units and a firm order for roughly 80 to start equipping their medium forces brigades. So Germany is moving to production. The UK is effectively buying a prototype to see if it fits in the garage.
And the timeline is the kicker. When does the British Army actually get this one test vehicle?
Not until the second quarter of 2028.
2028. That is 2 years from now, just to get the tires on the ground for a test. That feels incredibly slow, given the geopolitical temperature in Eastern Europe right now.
It is slow. But there's a strategic reason for the throttle being pulled back, and it ties into that Trinity House agreement you mentioned earlier. It's all about industrial sovereignty. The UK didn't just want to buy German guns off the shelf, they wanted to make them.
This is the barrel factory deal.
Yes. As part of this agreement, Rheinmetall is building a new barrel factory in Telford, right here in the UK. They're going to be manufacturing the 155mm barrels for the RCH-155 and the 120mm smoothbore guns for the new Challenger 3 tanks.
So the logic is, we can wait a few years for the guns if it means we own the factory that makes the barrels forever.
Exactly. It's a lesson learned directly from the war in Ukraine. You can't rely on complex international supply chains for basic steel when the shooting starts. You need domestic capacity, and bringing that steel production back to the UK defense base is arguably more valuable in a long war than getting 10 guns next week.
That makes perfect sense for the long term. But if you look at the Donbas, the timeline isn't long term, it's immediate. And that leads to the big twist in this story. The UK is waiting until 2028. Germany is ramping up for 2027. But someone is already operating these things, aren't they?
Ukraine, they're the launch customer, the very first operator of the RCH-155.
So Ukraine ordered them before Germany or the UK?
Years before. Ukraine ordered 54 units way back when the war was in its earlier grinding phases. They saw the specs and said, we need that mobility. And while the UK waits for 2028, the first RCH-155 was symbolically handed over to Ukraine in Kassel, Germany back in January 2025. That's a whole year ago.
So they have them, they're on the battlefield.
They have the first batch for training. It's happening in Germany as we speak. But there have been delays, and this is crucial to understand because it highlights the complexity of modern warfare. The delay wasn't mechanical, it was digital.
How so? The robot turret works, the chassis works. What failed?
The interface. You see, Ukraine doesn't fight like NATO. They use a homegrown, absolutely brilliant battlefield management system called Kropiva. It's effectively Uber for artillery.
A drone spots a target, drops a pin in the app, and the nearest gun fires.
Exactly. And the German RCH-155 computer couldn't talk to the Ukrainian app, not natively. KNDS, the manufacturer, had to spend months integrating Kropiva into the RCH-155's fire control brain. They need the gun to receive digital targeting data directly from Ukrainian drones and tablets without a human having to manually type in coordinates. That integration caused the delay from April 2025 to where we are now.
That makes perfect sense. And honestly, it's really reassuring. We aren't just dumping surplus hardware on them. We're customizing the bleeding-edge tech to fit their specific software ecosystem.
Absolutely. And here's the key takeaway for you listening. The lot of RCH-155s currently on the production line is for Ukraine. The reason the UK is at the back of the queue is largely because the factory is busy building them for Kyiv.
Which, let's be clear, is exactly where they should be. If the whole point of this equipment is to stop Russian aggression, having the Duns in the Donbass is infinitely more effective than having them parked on Salisbury Plain.
Precisely. It is a calculated risk. The UK accepts a capability gap at home to ensure Ukraine has the firepower to win, or at least hold the line in the east. And it's not just the guns. Reports suggest Ukraine is also getting Boxer command support vehicles with 30mm cannons to escort these artillery pieces.
To protect them from drones.
Exactly. High-value artillery is a magnet for FPV drones. Putting a Boxer with an autocannon right next to the RCH-155 creates a self-contained, highly mobile, self-defending fire unit. It is a very sophisticated package that will likely define how artillery is used for the next 20 years.
But let's look at the home front for a second. You mentioned a calculated risk for the British Army. How big is that gap exactly? Because we gave 100% of our AS-90s to Ukraine. What do we actually have left to shoot with right now?
It's a sensitive topic in the Royal Artillery. To plug the gap left by the AS-90 donation, the Ministry of Defense bought the Archer artillery system from Sweden.
But not many of them.
14. That's it. 14. That's barely a regiment. It's effectively a training capability. The Archer is a fantastic system. It's wheeled, automated, very fast. But 14 guns for the entire British Army is, well, it's not a war-fighting force.
So we have been, to use a harsh term, defanged.
Critics would definitely say yes. We've stripped the cupboard bare. And this creates a tension in procurement. There are voices saying, look, the RCH-155 won't be here in numbers until 2030. We should double down on Archer. Buy 50 of them right now so we have something.
But the mold is refusing.
They are holding the line on what they call fleet commonality. They want everything on the Boxer chassis. Makes maintenance easier, logistics simpler. The Archer runs on a Volvo truck chassis. The RCH-155 runs on a Boxer. If you have both, you need 2 supply chains, 2 sets of mechanics, 2 types of tires. The mode is betting that they can survive this gap with just 14 Archers to reach the logistics nirvana of an all-Boxer fleet in the 2030s.
That is a massive gamble on peace. We're betting that we won't need to fight a high-intensity war ourselves between now and 2030.
Or, to put it another way, we are betting on Ukraine. If Ukraine uses these RCH-155s to degrade the Russian military effectively, the immediate threat to the UK diminishes, and we can afford to wait. It's a strategy that relies entirely on supporting Ukraine to do the heavy lifting right now.
That's a very sobering way to look at it. We're essentially outsourcing our forward defense to Ukrainian gunners.
In a very real sense, yes. And we're supplying them with the best tools in existence to do it.
Okay, so the artillery is coming eventually. But looking at the broader picture of this British Army of 2030, artillery isn't the only thing in the pipeline. What else is on the horizon to support this new way of fighting? Because a gun only reaches 40 or 50 kilometers.
Right. To go further, you need to change the ammunition. And there's some very sci-fi stuff happening there. We have Project Scepter.
Project Scepter sounds like a Bond movie. What is it?
It's a ramjet-powered 155mm shell being developed by Tiberius Aerospace for the UK MODI.
A ramjet in a shell.
Yes. Normally, a shell is just a ballistic object. You throw it, and it falls. A ramjet sucks in air, compresses it, and burns fuel to generate thrust. It maintains its speed. The goal is to hit targets 150 kilometers away from a standard gun like the RCH-155.
That triples the range.
It blurs a line between artillery and missiles. If you can hit targets 150 kilometers away with a mobile gun, you can strike logistics hubs, command centers, airfields, things that used to be safe. It changes the whole geometry of the battlefield.
And speaking of missiles, I saw mention of Project Nightfall.
Yes, this is the heavy hitter. The UK has launched a classified competition for a ground-launched ballistic missile with a range of over 500 kilometers.
Wow. We haven't had that capability since the Cold War. Why bring it back now?
Because of what we're seeing in Ukraine. We used to assume the Air Force would handle deep strikes. We thought, why need a missile when a typhoon can drop a bomb? But in Ukraine, air defense is so dense that aircraft often can't operate freely. The Army realized it needs its own long stick to punch through. Project Nightfall is about regaining that strategic reach.
So the vision for the 2030s is a layered onion of death. RCH-155 for the close fight, Scepter ramjets for the mid-range, and Nightfall missiles for the deep strike.
Exactly. And you have the upgrades to the M270 rocket launchers to fire up to 150 kilometers as well. It's a formidable force on paper. But again, it all hinges on getting the hardware built.
And getting it built in a world where supply chains are stressed? That brings us full circle to the Telford factory. We aren't just buying off the shelf. We're trying to rebuild the industrial engine that makes these things.
And that just takes time.
So, to wrap this all up, the RCH-155 is coming. It's a spaceship on wheels, it shoots while moving, it hunts tanks, and it runs on an app. But for the UK listener, the headline is patience.
Patience for us. Urgency for Ukraine. The deal is signed. The factory is being
Yeah.
built. But the priority right now is getting these systems to the Donbass. The British Army will be lean for a few years, but the trade-off is that Europe's frontline defense gets the best kit available first.
It's a bold strategy. And frankly, seeing what the Ukrainians have done with the older kit, the Caesars, the Crabs, the M777s, I can't wait to see what they do when the RCH-155s are fully integrated with Kropiva and deployed in force. It really could be the overmatch they need.
I think it will be. But before we close, I want to leave you with one thought to chew on regarding this shift to automation. We talked about moving from a 5-person crew to a 2-person crew.
Yeah, it sounds incredibly efficient on a spreadsheet.
It is efficient.
Yeah.
But in war, people do more than just pull triggers. They do maintenance. They change tracks in the mud. They stand guard duty at night. They have to reload the massive ammo modules. If you only have 2 people in that vehicle, who keeps watch while the commander sleeps?
That's a great point. If one person gets sick or they're just exhausted after 3 days of combat, the whole unit just stops.
Exactly. You're removing the redundancy of human muscle. Extreme automation makes the unit incredibly lethal, but potentially more fragile in a prolonged, exhausting campaign. It's a question militaries are really going to have to figure out as we move toward this robot-assisted warfare.
A fascinating problem to have. Automation solves the problem of speed, but creates the problem of resilience. That's the nature of defense technology. You've been listening to Defense Report by Alex and Arya, where we analyze the latest in military strategy, global defense, and advanced weaponry. And before you go, a quick reminder. Subscribe to Defense Reports, your go-to source for timely, in-depth military and defense reports. We'll catch you next time.